What's good, my people? Welcome into Buckets, Action Network's daily NBA betting podcast. We're in the workshop. Tuesday trade deadline. Got to talk about that. And then, of course, we're going to break down the Wednesday NBA slate. It's not the trade deadline, but it's approaching, and a bunch of big-time moves came in. We'll break them all down. I'm with two of the fellas, Joe Dellera and K1 Kyle Murray. I am your host, Sean Little. We got a lot to talk about with a lot of people moving, changing uniforms. We were sweating if our guy James Harden might even suit up for Cleveland tonight. We had a couple laughs about that. Let's start there, boys. Before we get into the 3-star, 2-star, 1-star plays for the Wednesday NBA slate, it's actually a really good slate. Tough to break down, but a lot of good games on it. Let's talk about Harden to Cleveland, swapping for Darius Garland. He's now a Clipper. This is a heated one, an interesting argument because, and even some different looks and feels from the books. Like if you talk about the big dogs, DraftKings currently has the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 370 after this move to win the East. That's behind the Knicks, who are the favorite at plus 320, and the Pistons are plus 360. But at FanDuel, they are the favorite at plus 280 to win the East. Joe Dellera, I'll come to you first. Give me your thoughts on Harden for Garland straight up, because Garland was like, let's not forget, Garland was fucking awesome last year. He was awesome for them. He hurts the foot late end of the season in the playoffs. It lingers into this year, but when he's been on the court, he's been really good as well. He just can't stay healthy. Would you have moved him? How do you feel about the move overall with Harden now going to Cleveland in the middle of the Clippers playing their best basketball of the year as well?
Honestly, it's not really the trade that I would have expected to be made by Cleveland. I thought that there would have been more likely maybe like a breakup with Jared Allen moving somewhere else instead. But and trying to get them under. It's actually the craziest part about this is that they're a second apron team and they pulled off a trade. Like they actually have salaries to basically line up where it's almost dollar for dollar, and they're bringing in a couple dollars less in terms of Harden's contract. So I think that that's actually one of the crazier aspects of this deal that I think is going to kind of go under the radar. But from a on-court basketball perspective, I think the problem was Garland and Mitchell, the combination of them. While like there were certain times where the offense was just ripping, they just really couldn't defend at all. And like the lineup combinations were rough. So now I think you get a guy with James Harden, who obviously James can still score with the best of them. And we saw that when Kawhi was out, he was putting up some monster numbers still, like even from a scoring perspective. But he is somebody that is a little bit more comfortable, I think, not only facilitating, dishing the rock, making sure everybody's getting their touches in, but also his size is, I think, important. And one of the things that we kind of get to talked about or not talked about enough about James Harden is while people have talked about him as not necessarily a great defender, he's actually gotten a lot better in one-on-one situations. He's not the fastest, but he's not somebody you're going to beat, especially in the post. He's not somebody you can just post up. He can guard people one-on-one. He's not a total negative on defense. So I think that changing up literal size of Harden and Garland, plus the fact that Garland doesn't seem like he's going to be somebody that can necessarily even be healthy. And even though James Harden has not necessarily been like a playoff riser, so to speak, throughout his career, he still is a guy that I think can really help this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Do I think they should be the favorite right now in the Eastern Conference? That's a dramatically different question. And honestly, I don't really know how you do. I don't know how you really get there when like Detroit's playing as good as they are and they're like runaway the 1 seed right now at this point. And then even New York's playing better. There's a lot of other teams that are playing really well. And especially from where Cleveland kind of is in the standings. I get that the East is a little bit malleable in terms of where teams are in the loss column, but still bringing in guys and betting on trades is always like a really, really tough scenario. Like you don't know how it's totally going to fit on court. So I think that if anything, I would just wait. This number, it kind of reacted in a way where you're not going to get much better value now than you would even potentially before the playoffs. And you know what the matchups are, you know what looks good, and you know if there's maybe any other moves the Cavaliers or the rest of the Eastern Conference is going to pull off. So I would say don't bet them right now. But if you do want to bet them, at least wait until after the trade deadline and see where kind of the pieces fall.
One thing that's obviously an issue with Garland is he can't stay on the floor right now. Part of me in my gut tells me, they feel maybe Donovan Mitchell's getting a little impatient, carrying the load, and it feels like that window's kind of closing up. But James Harden last year was third-team All-NBA, an All-Star, and his numbers are almost better this year, depending on what you're looking at. Last year, he averaged 23 a game. He's averaging 25.4 this year. He's shooting better from two, essentially the same mark from three, a touch, like just over a half an assist less than last year. But also, bro, he's been an Iron Man kind of the last couple of years. Last year, he played 79 games and started 79. Year before that, it was 72. And he's on pace to do something very similar this year. What do you think of the trade? What do you think of the fit? Where should they be favored? What do you think of the change in the East? Wrap it all up, because then we could talk about Detroit as well, because I think they made some sneaky good moves as well.
Yeah, man, we talked about it a little bit last night, and I think the biggest thing, if you're, a Cavaliers fan or somebody kind of trying to break down the Cavs, I mean, they're clearly in a spot where they're pushing all the chips in, and it's difficult to just have any confidence that you're going to have Darius Garland available at any given moment, because he's just been inconsistent while being on the floor, with that toe and foot injury. So, bottom line, I think that is, to your point, Sean, you mentioned he's been an Iron Man, Harden has all year, and, pretty much his entire career. So that's a huge plus, and we have a lot of people in chat saying stuff along those lines as well. But availability is a huge skill set here, and they haven't had Garland pretty much at all this season. They didn't have him at times in the postseason last year. So having someone in that role and someone who can help out with, taking away some attention from Donovan Mitchell, and obviously we know that Harden can go out there and score 40-plus points any given night. So I do think it certainly helps this Cavalier team, especially this season. Obviously, you can have a more significant debate about the grades of this trade, depending on how Garland's career goes. Obviously, he's going to have a longer leash than James Harden, who's sort of at the back end of his career. But nonetheless, for this season, I do think it is an upgrade for Cleveland, just because I don't think you can count on having Darius Garland. I do think there's been some fun conspiracy theory talks about this trade with Kawhi Leonard, and obviously dating back to that whole contract being paid under the table situation, and maybe he missed the All-Star game, maybe a suspension is looming. I think that's a funny thing to mention. I don't know if that's true, but nonetheless, I do think that it's kind of evident with how the Cleveland Cavaliers are approaching the way they are back half of the season. Looks like they're pushing the chips in, and I think Harden does give them a better chance to do that in a weaker Eastern Conference this season than in years past with Harden on their team rather than Darius Garland.
Yeah, they named Kawhi a reserve today, earlier in the day. So that part of that conspiracy debunked here on Buckets. But overall, I think it's a really interesting move. I think the conspiracy is like, when is Garland going to be back to like fully healthy for a long period of time? Like, I think it's really interesting trading for guys that are dealing with injuries and like major injuries or they're missing time. Like, this isn't a thing where Garland got hurt like a couple weeks ago. This lingered throughout the entire offseason and is now lingered into the next year. Like, who knows how healthy he is overall. I think it's really interesting that they're adding Harden here. Before we move on, Joe, let me ask you this. How does this affect Mobley and Allen, you think, maybe even on potential lob opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think it's probably a good thing for the development of Mobley in particular, and even for Allen, as long as they both stay on the team. I'm assuming Mobley isn't going anywhere, but I do think that it would be helpful for them. I think that I saw like a meme, and it was.
I think James Harden has just pulled the cord on our guy Joe Dellera's internet. But Kyle, before we move on, any thoughts on that potential improvement for the bigs in Cleveland with Harden then pulling the strings? Does it impact and help Mobley as we get Joe back?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it probably helps Jared Allen a little bit more than Evan Mobley because Mobley's more of a guy who relies on significant usage with the ball in his hands and whatnot. And I think Allen will benefit quite a bit from some of these pick and roll and lob situations. I think Mobley will benefit as well, but I do think Allen maybe to a little bit more extent just based on his current baseline and where he is going forward. I think that there might be some struggles usage wise between Harden, Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell. And Jared Allen, I don't think is really going to have those sorts of struggles at times. He's just going to kind of be what he is right now, being a guy to catch lobs and pick up some slack in the paint there. But for the most part, I do think Joe makes a good point. I think it'll help Mobley in the long term, especially once they sort of get things figured out in terms of how their system's going to work. I always think it's interesting to decipher how these teams will look after a big trade, especially with guys who have high touch rates going to a team with especially a guard who has a massive usage rate like Donovan Mitchell. And we saw it a little bit last year with Luka. How is he going to transfer over to the Lakers? But I think it's a little bit more of an interesting situation here because Luka was just going to be the guy no matter what. I think there might be a little bit of a power struggle, I suppose, between this usage rate here for the Cavs, and that'll be something that I think will be interesting to see play out in the prop market specifically.
Joe, go back and tell me more about your thoughts about Mobley before we move on here on Harden.
I mean, yeah, like if he wants more touches, he might just have to start grabbing some more rebounds. So I think that's what Mobley might have to do. But I think it's interesting. I think it gives him a little bit more optionality. And I do think that having the ability of like a guy who is like a pass first player or is one of the best passers and distributors in the NBA in James Harden is going to be a benefit to him and to Jared Allen. So I think it's also going to help Donovan Mitchell, who's been, kind of run ragged, I would say, throughout the past couple of postseasons, especially for Cleveland. You can take a couple possessions off. You don't need him on the floor in the same way as such a high usage player. So I think that there might be a little bit of an adjustment for Donovan. And I would think that honestly his assists might actually go down a bit as he maybe gets a little bit more single coverage in some of these opportunities.
I like the move. I think it improves them. I think come playoff time, we know that James and his MO is to kind of disappear and shrivel up a little bit. I think this fit is really good for him overall. If there are nights where he's not involved, and that's shown throughout his career where he just isn't as interested or not shooting it as well, there's a lot of other guys on that team that can score. This is a really interesting play. I'm excited to see how it plays out in the East because I think Cleveland's just like, this shit's wide open. We're not scared of Detroit. They're still young, and we played the Knicks and seen them a few times, and that's probably the team we're going to have to beat. So let's go get a guy that we know can really fill it up. I'm not as confident as you, Joe, in the backcourt defense.
No, I mean, it's going to be ass.
The size, though, is a plus up for sure. All right, couple other deals. Let's go to Boston because let's talk about the contenders, and then let's talk about Detroit first because I think they make sneaky moves. I'm in Chicago. I've been watching a ton of Kevin Huerter for the last couple of years. I think he's probably a better player than the metrics really lay out. And I think it's a good fit on Detroit. They also add Saric, who knows how much he'll be able to contribute. But I think those are still sneaky moves for a team that needed shooting, and maybe they aren't done. What do you think about K1, the Pistons adding Huerter and Saric there towards the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I would be pretty surprised if they are done just because of the fact that, it feels like adding that first round pick maybe gives them a little bit of more of an arsenal, but also the roster breakdown right now. I think that they have 15 guys and soon it'll be 16 because they plan to convert the Dennis Jenkins contract eventually. So seems like they have to make a move or two to get, rid of at least some of these guys. So maybe it's a spot where, they are looking to, add another significant player to the rotation, but regardless whether it's a small move or not, I do think that they are not done. However, I mean, as a Pistons fan, I was kind of hoping we could maybe swindle a team into believing in the Jaden Ivey ceiling, that sort of pitch down the line, maybe making him into a bigger deal. But nonetheless, I do think it at least sets them up to give some flexibility for another move that I think that they're going to have to make eventually, just with, having too many guys right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Bulls get Jaden Ivey as a part of that deal. Conley Jr. goes to Chicago. I doubt he suits up. the Minnesota's able to get off of that cash and get under, I believe, the first apron. I think Minnesota's they're not done making a couple moves. Joe, what do you think about the sly move of adding Herder, Saric, and then sending Ivy and getting that money off the books for Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting the money off the books is great. I think that Herder is just a guy that can obviously fill it up from beyond the arc. He's a little bit less one-dimensional than that, but that's one of the things that he does really, really well, which I think is important in a variety of different matchups, to just have like a knockdown shooter. So I think that was incredibly important for them. And then Minnesota, it does seem like they're really trying to get Giannis Antetokounmpo, and honestly, it's like, if you're not trading Ant, you should be able. You can trade anybody. Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. You just go for it. You're Minnesota. You're not necessarily getting all these marquee free agents, and I think that that's one of the things that kind of cuts against some of these squads and some of these teams. That's one of the things Milwaukee's kind of hoping for, is that you have a team that's willing to just kind of go all in, because it's like, hey, like, we're net. Granted, Giannis is kind of a once in a generation type of player anyway, but that, like, they really would have no chance of getting him if they didn't trade for him with some sort of contract there. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I'm very curious to see it, but to me, I still feel like, Shams has been giving us breadcrumbs, and like, I wonder if there's even loaf left here. Like, I don't know if this trade's even going to happen this season. They've been talking. I don't know. I think it behooves Milwaukee to just wait until the offseason when more teams can get involved and there's a lot more picks involved. That's what I would do if I was the Bucks. They don't really need to trade him right now. And if they're really bad, you maybe hold Giannis out. If you crush in the draft lottery, maybe Giannis says, like, hey, like, we're getting a top 5 pick. Maybe I want to stay here. Maybe that improves us to the point where he wants to stay in Milwaukee. So I think if you're Milwaukee, you really got to get a Godfather offer to move him.
Let me give you my quick rant on Giannis and the whole situation. I think this is going to sound kind of harsh, because we know Giannis got them a title and what he's done for the city, built them a new stadium. I get it. I think a part of me feels like Giannis kind of fucked Milwaukee, the fans, and the entire situation up, and himself. Like, the Hail Mary was adding Dame Lillard. When that didn't work out, it was over. It was done. Once he got stretched, it was over. This offseason was the time to pull eject, give them, come out with a statement, do say however you want to do it. But hey, my time in Milwaukee has come to an end. We're going to move on. Give them a ton of runway to figure out a package and a place for you to go for the absolute best package they can get. Let them fully reset. Don't have them sign Miles Turner to a big deal for no reason, zero reason to do that if Giannis is not going to be around. It's unnecessary. So I really think he's going to end up wasting an entire year in his prime, and it could have been avoided. So it frustrates me a bit there, just for Giannis and for the Milwaukee Bucks fan and the organization, because this all could have been taken care of in the offseason. There was no need to try to scramble here at the deadline. And then if it doesn't get done, essentially waste an entire season of Giannis when he's at the peak of his powers. I don't really get it. I think everybody that's a basketball fan, an analyst like us that break this stuff down all the time, the writing was on the wall in Sharpie bold, and I guess they didn't see it or didn't want to do it. So I don't really get it. I don't understand, but we'll see if Giannis gets moved or not. I think there's like, for example, we've talked about Kevin Durant being plug and play. I think the learning curve and the implementation of Giannis on the offensive end is probably the biggest change the team is going to have to deal with. So it's a disaster here that they're trying to scramble and figure out somewhere to send Giannis at the deadline with a couple days to go as we record this Tuesday night. All right, that's my rant on Giannis. Let's talk about the big fella from Chicago going to Boston. I guess can you call a big fella that doesn't play big boy ball, but he's big? Can you call Can you call him that? I don't know. But I do think it's an interesting fit. What do you think of why am I blanking on his name?
Vooch?
Yeah, what do you think of Vucevic going to Boston? Kata's still going to be there to, bang around with guys and play defense. So is Luka Garza. I mean, maybe, Vucevic's wish can be granted. He just shoot jump shots legitimately all day long. K1.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good fit. I do think that obviously moving Simons made a lot of sense because we even saw it tonight. They pushed Peyton Pritchard to the bench, still played 35 minutes and had a really solid game. So I think that actually fits. I think it might actually just make their team better, just having Pritchard in that unique role that he was so good in last year and even the last couple of seasons. So I think that is also a big benefactor in this trade. But we talked about it a little bit in the Buckets Slack channel, talking about the variation that the Hornets use with Kalkbrenner and Diabate. I think that gives them a little bit of, similar. Obviously, it feels weird to compare the Celtics to Charlotte, but with Vooch and with, Kata, I do think that sort of gives them a nice, duo there to interchange depending on, what they need at any given time. Obviously, Kata is, like Sean mentioned, more of a guy who can be the big body, hit the glass quite a bit, and then Vooch can obviously be more of a scoring producer at times. So I think it'll be similar to, the way they use Porzingis at times, but obviously, I think he's going to be a guy who plays a little bit more of a true center style role at times, but he won't need to because they also have Kata. So I think it'll be a good spot for Vooch, and I do think overall the trade is beneficial for them just because I do think getting Pritchard back to that 6-man role, or maybe even a spot where they can stagger minutes a little bit more, I think makes this team a little bit better even as is. So then adding Vooch is a guy who can go out there and score 18, 19, 20 points any given night, maybe grab 9 or 10 rebounds. I think it's a really solid fit for Boston.
Yeah, I agree. Dellera, they're going to be out there running, if Peyton Pritchard goes to the bench, he's looking to play starter minutes. Peyton Pritchard is a fucking killer on offense.
Yeah.
He was absolutely destroying Dallas tonight. But there's going to be a time where they're out there running Hauser, Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Vucevic. Like there's going to be a rotation where those guys are going to be getting it up all over the place. So I'm interested to see if he can play that, that stretch big role like Porzingis did and could knock down a lot of shots and be in a situation where they have legitimately 5 3-point shooters on the floor, and then they can just spread it out and then let Jaylen Brown get to the rack, which he has been doing at ease all year long and has been finishing with both hands. So yeah. I think it's interesting. What do you think about the Vucevic, JD?
I think it's great. I think that Simons was a little bit redundant to what they kind of had already. And especially, you figure they're going to get Tatum back potentially this year, but it sounds probably more like next year. You get Tatum back, and I just don't know where they would have used Simons. It just didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Pritchard did make some post-game comments, basically said he's going to be coming off the bench, I think, for the foreseeable future again, because they want that ability to stagger. And, I bet Peyton Pritchard today, I bet his points over, kind of assuming that, he wouldn't have that same overlap with Simons that he was kind of having, where I think they were trying to get Simons the ball, keep his trade value up. And that obviously worked. Now that he's gone, I think they can kind of go back to a little bit more of what works. And I think it's going to open up things for Derek White as a starter, because it's going to be really him and Jaylen Brown in the starting unit. Looks like Sam Hauser might play in that role now too, to go along with Vooch. So I think that's going to be interesting. But Pritchard off the bench is just dynamite, and it has not ever really impacted his minutes. So I think that it's actually going to improve his usage opportunities, coming off the bench, not having to share the floor with a guy like Simons, and just being able to do whatever he wants to do with that bench unit, which probably means get up a shitload of shots. So I like it for Pritchard. I like it for the Celtics. I think it's a move that helps them moving forward, and even potentially a little bit this year as well.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Let's talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. on the move to Utah. We joked in our group chat, Dellera, that Utah, I guess, are buyers here at the deadline. What are they trying to get done? It really just made me think about how that entire Ja situation really just threw everything off balance for the entire franchise of the Memphis Grizzlies. There was a real stretch where they were really, really good. We're talking Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, Dillon Brooks. Like everything kind of went downhill once Ja got in trouble and they moved Dillon Brooks. The entire franchise kind of imploded. And it's been like that for a while now. Bane moves to Orlando. Ja can't stay on the floor. So it's a shame what happened in Memphis because I did think they had like a little window to really compete and potentially push to make the finals in the West. Like that window was real when they had those guys on the floor. What do you think about that squad dismantling and then JJJ going to Utah? What are they trying to get done over there, Joe?
Utah, I think, just wants to make the fans suffer a little bit. Like, I think that's what they've been doing. But I mean, I like the move. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is awesome. So that backcourt or front court rather is going to be really nasty. I think with Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, whenever he's able to get healthy, next year, or Murray Markkinen being able to actually maybe play the 3. You actually can have like a pretty sizable team between those guys, Ace Bailey, Keontae George, Isaiah Collier. The Jazz have the potential to be good. I mean, they had like one of the craziest rotations ever today. Collier played 48 minutes. It's February. Like, what are we doing? So I think it's a great move for Utah. Anytime you can get a guy that's as talented as Jaren is. And I mean, I can't even fathom the amount of blocks you're going to get between Jaren and Walker Kessler. It's going to be like a lot of blocks, maybe as many as Victor Wembanyama by himself. But looking at the Memphis situation, I think that the part about it that's interesting is we saw how good they were playing, but I also think that we saw that they were kind of maxed out in the structure that they had with Ja, Bane, and Jaren as like their primary players, right? I think they waited too long. I think that when they moved off of Bane, that was fine. They were able to get like a ton for him. And I think the return for Jaren is solid. But I think if they had just moved him in the offseason and just said, you know what, like we're out, we're going to cut bait with everybody and we're just going to totally restart, I think that would have maybe even returned more. I think more teams would have been able to be involved. Now it kind of hit this critical point where Memphis had to say, well, like we're not going anywhere at all. And before Jaren gets hurt or anything like that, let's just move off of him. But the way the CBA is structured, I think it really benefits teams to wait until the offseason to make moves. And I think that's why we're not seeing as lively of a trade deadline as we normally would see, even though we have seen some pretty big trades so far.
Yeah, we got a little bit of noise today. I thought it was going to be a true dud, but we did get some noise today. Yeah, Collier had 22 dimes today. He was moving the rock all over. They're going to have a fun-ass team. I'm a huge Walker Kessler guy. I'm a huge Keontae George guy. If they keep the rest of that squad around, I guess they're buying for the future. Really interesting move. I mean, I think it gets everything that Jaren Jackson Jr. doesn't want to do, they already got guys that do. I think that it's a really good fit in Utah. And you said, Joe, you said backcourt, like – Jaren Jackson Jr. wants to play the backcourt. So, like,
I think this was going in my head.
It could be a backcourt of him and Keontae George, right? So, yeah, they got a lot of young guys that are options. K1, what do you think, JJJ here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if they can figure out a way to, play cohesively, Triple J and Walker Kessler be on the floor at the same time is going to be scary for teams trying to get into the paint. It's going to be really difficult. I think, I do agree with Joe that maybe they could have gotten more out of Triple J if they moved him a little bit earlier, maybe made it more of a bidding war. But regardless, I mean, they got a ton of picks between the Bane and the Triple J trades. And obviously with, everything.
Yeah, what is that, 7 ones?
7, yeah.
Yeah, they have the most now. They have the most.
Yeah. So considering everything went to
with Ja on the roster.
Exactly, yeah. So
like they could get anything, you know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, they might be down to 12 after they trade him,
Yeah, so I think that is worth noting at least. So they did get some firepower there. Maybe they can, utilize those in other trades or obviously draft well and obviously have a good base for a rebuild. But I mean, with all the names that we mentioned for Utah, if they can put together a team that can play cohesively, they certainly have all the talent in the world. Obviously, Utah, I feel like they have like this obsession with this, oversized lineup because even 2 years ago when they had John Collins trying to play the 4 and Markkinen at the 3, Kessler at the 5, they've been trying to do this for a few years now. So I guess it isn't a new thing to them. So maybe they're maybe already a foot in the door being able to figure out a way to make this oversized lineup kind of work. But I mean, especially with the way we've seen George develop this year, they have a ton of talent. And obviously Walker Kessler coming back, I think he is an absolute, monster to have there at the 5. So I like him quite a bit. And then this year, fingers crossed, maybe for the beginning of next year, hopefully we can see Zach Edey get back healthy, I think, opening this up could make him even more of a chance to develop here. Obviously, he was fantastic when he was healthy so far this season. The injury news hasn't been great for him, so maybe we don't see him again this year. But if we do, I think he'll be awesome in the prop markets at the end of the year or maybe early next season.
And don't doubt those Ainge boys, man. They're sitting in the kitchen somewhere in Salt Lake City like, what can we do here? Nobody's paying attention to us. Let's go get JJJ and start really building something up out here. We got a couple perimeter guys. We got some bigs in the middle. We got a stretch in marketing. Like, I could see Ainge and his pops really being like, let's make a little splash here and look forward to the next couple seasons where we may be able to make some noise. So, interesting day in the NBA. Ton of movement. The Chicago Bulls, speaking of backcourts, they have Josh Giddey, Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White, Trey Jones, Anthony Simons. Who am I missing?
Yuki Kawamura, dude.
Yuki, who averages the same amount of rebounds as Jaren Jackson Jr. So yeah, man, there's a lot of backcourt guys. I don't expect Kobe to be on the Bulls by the end of the deadline, but anything the Bulls do does not shock me. So stay tuned on that. All right, let's get to some plays here. 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. I'm under the weather. If you can't tell, my eyes are watering. I'm not feeling the best. So Joe and Kyle are gonna make the picks here. I'm just gonna try to lead the way. K1, give me your 3-star play for the Wednesday NBA slate.
Yeah, obviously we have another. What is this? The 4th or 5th time between these two teams with OKC and San Antonio. It's always must-watch TV here, but I'm taking the under in this game for one of the plays. I'm taking the under 28.5 PRA for Chet Holmgren. Projects for closer to 27 PRA for me. Obviously, very difficult matchup. He's going to see more Wemby. I believe the last 2 times he played the Spurs, Wemby was on a pretty significant minutes limit. Obviously, one of those times was in the NBA Cup game, and then shortly after that. So he's been held to a decent limit there, and obviously Wemby's been more of a, not necessarily full go, but in that 30 to 31 minute range at times, and if that's going to be the case, it'll be even more having his hands full. Hartenstein also back in the fold will take away some rebounding chances. So all things considered, when you put that all in a bundle, has me on the under for 28.5 PRA for Chet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with. I think this is the only team he doesn't want to see in the NBA.
Yeah,
this is the only team that makes Chet Holmgren uncomfortable in the entire league, and it's been on full display on national TV multiple times. He wants nothing to do with seeing Victor Wembanyama and the overall squad. Let's go back and look at some game logs. 12-13 was that might have been the NBA Cup semifinal. He had 17, 7 rebounds, no dimes. That's an under. Then 10 days later, they played. He had 7 and 3. The next 2 days later, that Thursday on Christmas, he had 10 and 12, 2 dimes. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at the numbers on every other team except then on 113, he had 8 and 10. Any reason why you didn't just go under on points and just add it up and just give you a little more? Is it just the projection overall in the PRA? Because he doesn't score against San Antonio either.
Hardenstein really back too, right? So
yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I was actually showing some value on the assist portion of the combo as well, because right now he's at 1.5 in the markets on assists, and that's the under is actually some plus money depending on where you look. So some inherent value there, and then the rebounding stuff as well. So if you wanted to do points and rebounds under, would not mind that as well. As again, I think Hartenstein re-entering the fold, market's still probably adjusting to that a little bit, and also considering the fact that Hartenstein been on a pretty significant minutes limit. This seems like a game where he could easily pop for a few extra minutes if the game stays close. So that would only continue to hurt Chet's rebounding upside there. And then, so I mentioned the assist portion of it as well. But that's the main reason why I'm on the combo here.
Yeah, JD, you feel the same way?
Yeah, I like this play a lot. I think this game is interesting, especially because the way the Spurs have kind of had their number a little bit lately. So it's going to be a compelling game. And obviously, Wemby being, potentially not on any type of limit is a great thing for any type of matchup like this.
Yeah, it passed every test. The numbers, the metrics, the eye test. He does not want anything to do with Victor Wembanyama, and I think Victor Wembanyama loves to lock up Chet and give him a hard time. I'm excited for this matchup, and this is probably the most interesting matchup in the West for me because they can meet in the. I would love to see 7 games of this matchup. Is what I'm saying in short. All right, JD, give me your 3-star play on the Wednesday NBA slate.
So I'm going to stay in this game, actually. I like Devin Vassell over 11.5 points. I think this is starting to move kind of already. But I like the 11.5. I think it's a good spot against Oklahoma City. Looking back at his history against OKC, the 11.5 he'd hit in 6 of 7 games. He missed it in 1 game this season in the most recent, but the other 2 he scored 23 and 17. The biggest thing is that the Spurs are relatively weak against like spot up shooters, which Vassell is excellent at. And I think that Oklahoma City has enough defensive weapons to kind of stymie some of the ball handlers and push the ball out of, guys like Castle and Fox's hand. I think it makes life very difficult for them. And they're pretty comfortable dishing to the perimeter and getting some of those guys like Devin Vassell looks from beyond the arc. So Wemby as well, I think it's like a relatively tough matchup. Not that any matchup is like super, super difficult for him, but I mean, if you're going to engineer a player to try to cover him, it's probably a guy like a combination of Chet and Hardenstein. It's a nice like look that they can throw at him. So I think that for me, Vassell is a pretty good spot here. Additionally, it looks like he's off any type of his minutes restrictions. He's come back. This is going to be now his 5th game back from injury. We just saw him play basically like 30 minutes the last 2 games. So I think it's a good opportunity for him here against the Oklahoma City Thunder, even though it's presumably a tough matchup, but OKC still allows a bunch of threes, and that's kind of where Vassell makes a lot of his money. So I'm going to grab Vassell at over 11.5 points.
Yeah, OKC coming off a back-to-back as well. They played tonight. They absolutely were rolling earlier tonight, but something to keep in mind if you're looking at the matchup as well. OKC will be on a back-to-back. All right, 2-star play, Kyle Murray for the Wednesday NBA slate.
Yeah, I'm taking Houston minus 5.5 here. I just grade Houston out as a better team straight up here, and obviously I think they have a little bit of home court advantage and whatnot. But it's never fun fading the Celtics. Obviously, they've been amazing this year, especially against the spread. But I do think there's a slight chance that we also see them get the health advantage. Houston there, would not be surprised to see maybe some Boston shenanigans there on the second half of back-to-back. We've seen them sort of take it easy on guys like Jaylen Brown and Derek White. So maybe that's a thing that's factoring in as well. But for the most part, when I grade these 2 teams out full strength, as is obviously Finney-Smith's going to miss this game for Houston. But other than that, and Steven Adams is obviously out for the year, I make Houston 7.5 point favorites in this one. So I do think that maybe we see a little bit of rest advantage. Obviously, Houston didn't play tonight. Boston did, so they'll have the rest advantage there. But again, maybe a little bit of injury report advantage as well for Houston. So I like the 5.5 play.
Yeah, speaking of a back-to-back, Boston will be on a back-to-back as well. They just played in Dallas, little in-state, Texas, Lone Star State, little back-to-back. Not much travel, but still a little bit of travel. Getting ready, you got to get packed up and then get to another city in a short amount of time. And also, it's tough when you're playing a defensive first team too. When you're on a back-to-back on no rest overall. I had the number pulled up, but on no rest, all the matchups for Boston and Houston with the rest advantage lean 2 under. So take a look at those trends if they interest you. But I think this is a good spot for Houston to cover a number that's under 2 full possessions. So yeah, I agree with it. I was actually looking at that. If I was going to put together a cap, Houston was going to be on my list. JD, any thoughts on Houston laying 5.5 against the Celtics coming off a back-to-back?
Yeah, I feel like it's a tough spot for Boston, especially like Kyle was kind of mentioning in terms of some of the rest they've wanted to give guys. You're also looking at a team that doesn't have now, like because they're thinner, because they traded Simons, and I doubt that Vooch would play in this game. You're kind of looking at a spot where if they do rest guys like Jaylen Brown or Derek White, you're really getting kind of deep into the bench here against the Rocket team that's very good and obviously very athletic, and they're like a bigger team too. So pretty tough spot, I think, for Boston here.
Any thoughts, fellas, overall on the next couple days? Because you might print some slips and your guy. So, for example, we're not talking props. Like if you bet a prop and a guy gets moved, it'll get voided if he doesn't play, right? Or if he plays, or if he gets traded, it's going to get voided anyway. But if you're taking a side here, any thoughts or any advice for people that are looking at sides and totals in the middle of the madness that is the trade deadline coming up? Anything you've done in previous years, Dellera, that maybe have affected props, or you got better numbers because of some rumors of some guys moving and potentially capitalizing on some increased minutes because it looks like this guy's going to get moved? Or, for example, Harden gets moved, people are instantly going to look at what happened in the East, but maybe they should be looking at who's going to get those minutes now on the Clippers.
Yeah, so I think, and this can lead into my 2-star play, but I think the way to kind of look at it is say who might get moved, and like, is there a player that maybe the prop I like anyway, and they're unlikely to get moved, or there's other players on the team that I think are more likely to get moved that would open up more space or more minutes or more opportunity for that guy. So I think that's one of the things that I always like to try to look at, and you're trying to obviously gauge the market and see, who. Like if there is going to be a trade that's made, like, do you think that this team is going to be impacted by it? Or do you think it's going to happen today? If they do make this trade, is it like, even for Cleveland, for example, like they make this trade for James Harden, it doesn't really matter for them right now because Darius Garland wasn't playing anyway. So it's really just the only question is, for example, like, is Harden going to play on whatever it is, Wednesday night? So probably not, but I think that's kind of the way you can look at it. So for me, with James Harden gone, I was looking at the Clippers and trying to figure out who may or may not take up some of this usage. This line is like a little bit out there right now, but I like Collins over 15.5 points. I would play this a little bit later now. I want to see, kind of where it shakes out a little bit. I'm only seeing it on one book right now, but I do think that here in the spot against the Cavs, you do need to generally play like a couple more bigs here. You've got Mobley, you've got Allen. And I think that for Collins, for example, he's somebody that can pick up some of the slack. He can kind of create for himself a little bit. He can obviously score if he's getting dished to as well. And I think that between him and Kawhi, they're just going to really kind of have to absorb a lot of the usage that Harden didn't have. I think that Zoo is going to maybe struggle a little bit more. He tended to get a lot of his opportunities on pick and roll plays with James Harden. And while Collins obviously benefits a little bit from some of that Harden passing, I think that he's a little bit less dependent on getting assisted to score the basketball. So I like Collins over 15.5. I think it's a decent look against this Cavs team.
Murray, any thoughts on just overall, like the last couple of games with James out? Kobe Sanders touched 34 minutes the last time out versus Philly. There's a lot of different guys that can get affected. Anything that goes into your projections, the way you try to get ahead of numbers or potentially can catch, books sleeping when they got to figure out they're trying to move a lot of different markets, and they may not be looking at Sanders props, but he's going to get some extra minutes with a guy like Harden not being in the fold.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's always a spot where maybe we see some crazy things rotation-wise, but the Clippers, we've actually gotten some nice samples from them the last 2 games because Harden's been missing these games anyway. And so far this season, with James Harden off the floor, only 3 guys who've been playing. Bogdan doesn't seem to be in the rotation right now. Only 3 guys have a better usage rate differential in a positive way than John Collins. And there's actually some 14.5s out there as well. So you can definitely shop around and get an even better number. Nice. Collins spot 15 plus points in 3 straight games and in 4 of his last 5. So I like this play quite a bit. Collins up to about 22% usage rate with Harden off the floor this season. And I also think that maybe now he wants to be a little bit more aggressive with that being more of a long-term situation going forward. So I like it.
Yeah, was trying to figure out where those were popping. So happy to see that there's 15 plus.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep it rolling. 1-star play, or did you give me your 2-star already, K1?
Yeah, Houston minus 5.5 was my 2-star.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Give me your 1-star play for the Wednesday NBA slate.
Yeah, so this one kind of correlates with Joe's 1-star play, his Vassell option. I like the Champagny over 8.5 points. when looking at the Spurs minutes while trying to chart together some projections real quick before going live, I will say, obviously we had a massive slate today, obviously lots of news, and then an 11 o'clock game. So that usually delays my process with projections and whatnot when even trying to get some early plays up. But when looking at the Spurs minutes, there is some volatility here because, again, I haven't done a real in-depth run through, and Stephon Castle looks like he's going to be returning for this game. But I still do have Champagnie at 28 minutes in this one. And all the things that Joe said matchup-wise, I think correlates here as well. The Thunder, but primarily have been a really good matchup for opposing three-point shooters. We've seen it play out in this match specifically over the past few matchups where we've seen guys like Fox and Castles have a ton of assists because, like Joe mentioned, they're looking to sort of blitz these guys up when they bring the ball up and opens up some things for some of these shooters. So I think that really benefits Champagnie. Over his last 17 games, he has 9+ points in 15 of them. He's been playing really well, and he's been hitting the three at a pretty significant clip. You do have to worry a little bit about maybe some regression for him, but the minutes have been solid. And I do think that if somebody does sort of end up getting the short end of the stick here minutes wise of these wings, I do think it would probably be either Harrison Barnes or Keldon Johnson and not guys like Vassell or Champagnie. So I'm glad me and Joe are on sort of the same fold here with the cap on some of these wings. And mainly when I'm looking at the 28-minute projection here for Champagnie in this matchup, I have him for right just under 11 points, 10.8 here in this spot. So I like the over 8.5, and this will certainly move, I think, to at least 9.5. I think there's already some 9.5s out there. So 8.5 is obviously the perfect number because he's going to be a guy who kind of lives and dies by the three. So hits 3 threes and call it a day. But I would recommend getting on the 8.5 as quick as possible.
Kyle Murray is saying make sure you watch Spurs Thunder. That's where the money is going to be at, and that's going to be the best game on the slate. All right, Joe, talk to me about your 1-star play for the Wednesday slate here.
Yeah, so right now, like I would almost call this like a half a star, a shooting star, if you will, maybe some stardust. I'm on Rudy Gobert over 20.5 points plus rebounds. I think that the matchup's pretty solid for him here. Gobert is also one of the players on the Minnesota Timberwolves who just isn't going to get traded. He just his contract is just untenable. Like you're not going to move him. You're not going to trade him. And honestly, his defense has been so important. He's just not getting moved. So for me, we were talking about some of these players that could move, might not move. Minnesota's apparently trying to make a pretty big push for Giannis. They're trying to make some pushes for like point guards, trying to move a couple players around, whether it's Julius Randle, Jaden McDaniels, etc. Rudy's going to play. So I think that for him in this matchup against Toronto, who doesn't really have a true number 5 right now, I think it's a pretty good spot. He's averaging 23.1 PR on the season, and in head-to-head matchup against Toronto the past couple of seasons, he's gone over this in every single game with a low of 24 PR. Obviously slightly different things in terms of matchups, personnel that's available, etc. But I do think it's a pretty good spot for Rudy against this Raptors team on that just doesn't really have a real traditional number 5 big.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the simple side of the cap there. Just not a traditional big with Scotty soaking up a ton of those boards and our guy Colin Murray Boyles scooping up a few here and there as well. All right, we got a parlay for you guys on a Wednesday night. It's a little SGP in that marquee game being the Thunder Spurs. Let's go Devin Vassell. Over 11.5 points. Chet Holmgren under 28.5 PRA, and Julian Champagnie over 8.5 points. That's plus 556. Shop around, get the best parlay number you can in the market. That'll do it for us here on Buckets. A little recap here. Joe Dellera, 3-star play. Devin Vassell over 11.5 points. 2-star John Collins over 15.5 points. Capitalizing on James Harden not pounding a rock. Maybe he'll get a few more touches. Then Rudy Gobert, a little half-star, over 20.5 points plus rebounds. K1, Kyle Murray, Chet Holmgren, under 28.5 PRA. He has struggled against the Spurs all season long. Hopefully that keeps up. Houston Rockets playing the Boston Celtics on a back-to-back, minus 5.5. Get the best number you can. Julian Champagnie over 8.5 points against those Thunder. Until next time, which is tomorrow, for Kyle Murray, for Joe Dellera, I'm Sean Little. Let's get buckets, baby.